Yeah.
We mentioned specifically two of the matter factors, feeling discrimination.
Yeah.
Now, in another division, we have the 5 omnipresent matter factors, which are very important. And I'm trying to think how these two are more important than, for example, intention, which creates karma. Is it in what way is it more important?
Yeah. Well, I'm not suggesting that it's more or less important, but in this way of describing, we're really talking about the two mental factors that initially get us into trouble. And often intention comes on the basis of those. We develop a certain intention based on our feeling and a discrimination. So intention is very important, of course, but often it's on the basis of these that we develop intention.
Is it fair to say that common psychological processes like transference or projection, right, are discrimination issues? Like where somebody does something that pisses us off, but we don't realize that it's not my parent, it's not me, it's them.
Right. Yeah.
And we're not distinguishing the situation.
Right. I think you'll find that this is at a very sort of foundation level, and then on top of this, then the sort of the intellectual mind does more projection and more stuff on top of that as well. So I think in this level here, there are sort of layers of this. So here, we're talking about sort of a very primitive level, just distinguishing one thing from another. And then on that basis, we often incorrectly then project a lot of stuff on top of that. For example, you know, I could correctly discern or discriminate pen, but on top of that, I could project all sorts of stuff that is not very helpful. So I think this is at a more cognitive level, a more intellectual level, we do this projection on top of this. But if we get this wrong, then the rest is a mess. If we get this right, there's no guarantee that things are good, because then we just project. I mean, I have correctly discriminate this is a pen, but then on that basis, I can project all sorts of stuff that creates a lot of problem.
Just one other quick question. Is compassion a compositional factor?
Yeah, usually it's listed here as sort of, you'll have what's called non-attachment, non-ignorance, and non-aversion or something. It's listed in that way, but it's sort of implied in there. Okay. Just one or two things, and then we'll, I think it's lunchtime then. So if we go back to the Heart Sutra here, it says, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So in this afternoon session, we'll look at this word inherent nature and empty of inherent nature and what that means. But I'd just like to, for a few minutes, look at this correctly and repeatedly beholding. Because this is really telling us how we are to approach our emptiness practice. In fact, this word here, repeatedly, actually in Tibetan it's jesu, which actually is probably better to translate as not repeatedly, but as subsequently. So actually, another way of translating this is, instead of correctly and repeatedly behold those 5 aggregates, to subsequently see in a correct way that those 5 aggregates are also empty of inherent nature. So to subsequently see in a correct way means that subsequent to investigation, we come to see that they're empty of inherent nature. So what we're talking about here is we need to investigate in a logical, methodical way to come to subsequently see that things are empty of inherent nature. We need to apply reasoning or inference. So here we can talk about 3 types of phenomena. the first type of phenomena is what's called manifest phenomena. And a manifest phenomena is something that with our senses we can confirm and validate its existence. So this pen is a manifest phenomena because with my eyes I can validate, confirm it exists. So that's manifest. Then we have what's called slightly hidden. And slightly hidden is any phenomena that we can't directly validate its existence through the senses. And the classic example that's often given in the text for an example of this is that off in the distance in the mountains we see some smoke rising. Based on that smoke, we can correctly infer the existence of a fire, because based on the understanding wherever there's smoke, there's fire. If we see smoke, we can logically, correctly validate the existence of fire, even though we can't directly see it. So the fire on a distant mountain where we only see smoke is an example of slightly hidden. We can confirm the existence of it through logic. And then we have extremely hidden. And that is very subtle phenomena that we can't come to validate their existence through reasoning and logic. And one example of that is the very subtle workings of the law of cause and effect, that we can't see that, we can't infer that. We can only know these extremely hidden phenomena when we purify the mind and be able to directly perceive these when we achieve enlightenment. Fortunately, emptiness is in this category, meaning that we can come to correctly infer that things are empty of inherent nature through using reasoning and logic. And so that's what's being recommended here, is that as a beginner, even on the beginning stages of the path, we use reasoning and logic to come to subsequently see in a correct way that not only the person but the body and mind are also empty of inherent nature. And so in the next session this afternoon, we'll look at some ways of doing that investigation. How can we logically investigate to come to correctly see that things are empty of inherent nature? And there are a number of ways of doing that. And we'll look at one in particular in this afternoon's session. So that's all I wanted to cover because it's lunchtime now. So let's break for lunch and come back at 1:30.